Church History 2, Lecture 11. We're done with successionism. Now we have the really short topic of history of Baptists in England through the Reformation. And then if you look at your course outline, we're going to eventually get to recent history. That's my favorite. Though I love ancient Baptist history. I do. The great prophet John had immediate commission from heaven before he entered upon the actual administration of his office. And as the English Baptists adhere closely to this principle, that John the Baptist was by divine command the first commissioned to preach the gospel and baptize by immersion those that receive it. That this practice has ever since been maintained and continued in the world to this present day. So some of this is going to be a little hard to follow because it's an older way of talking. This is from the History of the Baptists, 1738. It's copied from. Well, Crosby believed that immersion had been continuously practiced in England since the time the gospel was preached in Great Britain, soon after our Savior's death. So that's what Thomas Crosby was believing there. You don't have to know the name Crosby. But we've already taught this, that it was Baptist churches go back to the time of Jesus Christ, all the way through that. But here, I'll read it again. Immersion had been continuously practiced in England since the time the gospel was preached in Great Britain. So, baptismal immersion. Sprinkling isn't recorded as being practiced in England until 1644. Here's a picture or a map of England or UK, Britain. The first churches planted in Great Britain were Baptist churches. Hall said, the prevalence of Baptists in Britain from the earliest times and in no small numbers will be questioned by no one who is at all familiar with the religious history of the land of our fathers. Baptists in Britain. Yeah. The whole facts of history place the truth beyond dispute. I have seen enough to convince me that the present English dissenters, contending for the sufficiency of Scripture and for primitive Christian liberality, to judge of its meaning, may be traced back in authentic manuscripts to the Nonconformists, to the Puritans, to the Lollards, to the Waldenses, to the Albigenses, and I suspect to the Paulicians and others, to the Apostles. So England. And where do we come from? America, at least. England, as a country. Truth never dies. Its vitality is imperishable. In the wild wastes and fastnesses of Europe and Africa, it grew. A succession of able and intrepid men taught the same great principles in opposition to a corrupt and affluent state church, which eventually were taught by modern English nonconformists. Well, these nonconformists were the true Baptists, I believe, back at that time. So if you conform, you're going along with it like a state church system. I think we'll talk about conformists and nonconformists in this lecture. As we shall afterwards show, the rise of the Anabaptists took place long prior to the foundation of the Church of England. So don't think that the first church in England was the Church of England. The Baptists were there long before. And these are also reasons for believing that on the continent of Europe, small hidden societies who held many of the opinions of the Anabaptists have existed from the time of the Apostles. In the sense of the direct transmission of divine truth and the true nature of spiritual religion, it seemed probable that these churches have a lineage of succession more ancient than the Roman Church, says Barclay, who was a Quaker historian. And I've quoted that other places. Welsh history states that the Welsh lady Claudia married a man named Pudens, who then traveled to Rome and met Paul while he was in prison in 63 A.D. Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own hired house and received all that came in unto him. Dr. Cassidy says, we believe that Claudia and others who were converted under Paul's ministry in Rome carried the precious seed with them and scattered it on the hills and valleys of Wales. And since that time, many thousands have reaped a most glorious harvest. 2 Timothy says, do thy diligence to come before winter. I think Paul's saying to Timothy, Eubulus greeteth thee, and Pudens, and Linus, and Claudia, and all the brethren. Probably the same people. At length in the year 180, Lucius was converted. He was the first king to receive baptism, correct baptism. Lucius the king in England. He and his people were baptized upon a profession of their faith. It is generally agreed that at this period many pagan temples were turned into edifices for the worship of the true God. The king got saved. Wouldn't that be great if our king, our president, was truly a born-again Christian? I mean, some say he's been converted. I don't know. I haven't seen a change. I've heard about a change, but he might have been. But to where you can say, this person got saved. He's different now. Need to pray for that for Trump. The true origin of Anabaptists, says Moshe, the great Lutheran historian, the true origin of Anabaptists is hid in the remote depths of antiquity. But there is no reason to doubt that as early as the 3rd century, Baptists already existed in Britain. At that period, no persons were admitted to baptism by the churches generally, but such as had been previously instructed in the principal points of Christianity, and had also given satisfactory proofs of pious dispositions and upright intentions. Coupling with this testimony the statement of Tertullian, the celebrated African writer, that in 200 AD, those parts of Britain into which the Roman arms never penetrated have yielded subjection to Christ. And we are warranted in saying that the early British Christians were men holding the distinctive principles of Baptists. So, England, we're looking at England and their history of true churches. Not the Church of England, we've already covered that a bit. We're looking at churches like our church, Brother Bo. Amen. Code letter A, Alpha, Apple, code letter A. Under Diocletian, about the year 300, the British Christians suffered a fierce persecution. Their books and churches were burnt, and many of them put to death, like we hear about with the Waldenses, Paulicians, and others. The true Christian doctrine and form of worship as delivered by the apostles was maintained in England, and the Romish government and ceremonies zealously withstood till the Saxons entered into Britain about the year 448, during which time there is no mention of any baptizing in England, but adult persons only. So infant baptism hadn't started yet in Britain. And from this silence of history, the English Baptists have concluded that there was no such practice as baptizing of infants in England for the first 300 years after it received the gospel. And certainly he would have a very hard task that should undertake to prove that there was such a thing. So that's immersing. We're even talking about immersing infants. There wasn't even that. No type of baptism of infants recorded in Britain, in England. There's one being baptized. That was the year, I think, 200 AD there. Right? No. Infant baptism was in vogue long before 600 AD in many parts of the world, but not in Britain. No. The ordinance, sorry. Must be the grape soda I'm having. There's some, I react to dyes. So there's blue dye number, whatever. It kind of affects me. The ordinances of the gospel were then administered exclusively there, according to the primitive mode, the scriptural mode. That was their unanimous sentiment as a nation from the time that the Christian religion was embraced by them in 62 AD until a considerable time after, 600 AD maybe. So they followed the Bible a lot, at least. It wasn't the Church of England controlling things, it was Baptist churches like ours. All right, a few more minutes and we're going to be done here. For the space of 40 years, the noted St. Patrick, a Britain-born man, preached extensively among the Irish, Scotch, and Britons. The time of his birth, even the century in which he was born, is unknown. It was probably the close of the 4th century. I mean, that's way back for St. Patrick. Wow. So what's the 4th century? 300s. No certain data can be given concerning his beliefs. It can, however, be positively stated that he was not a Roman Catholic. In fact, I think a lot of people have pretty much proven that he was a born-again believer, was Baptist. And also, no certain data, but it can be, however, possibly stated that he was not a Roman Catholic, and that he approximated in many things the doctrines of the Baptists. So he's similar to Baptists, at least, Baptistic. In regard to the form of baptism, practiced. In regard to the form of baptism Patrick practiced, immersion. Let me try that again. And take 3. In regard to the form of baptism Patrick practiced immersion upon a profession of faith. Man, where do you put the emphasis in all that? Okay. So he practiced immersion. Who did? Patrick. During his life, he is said to have immersed 120,000 people. I thought it was just going to be 120. 120,000? That sounds like a Baptist. Well, doesn't prove he was. He baptized Hircus, a king, in the fountain of Logolis, and thousands of others on that one day. I think he probably had some people helping him. There's Ireland, the map of it. I don't know how well you can see it. Probably not too well. Sorry about that. In 521, a man named Columba was born to parents belonging to one of these Celtic churches. In 563, he began to do missionary work among the Picts in Scotland. So no, Columba, missionary, Baptist missionary, Picts, Scotland. To do this, he established a base on the island of Iona in the Hebrides group off the west coast of Scotland, halfway between Scotland and Ireland. From this mission station, missionary teams evangelized Scotland and England and Normandy, Friesland, Denmark, and parts of Germany. Columba died in 597. So we're looking at some information we have on history of, we believe, true Baptists, true churches, and their missionaries, starting churches way, way, way back. There's not a lot of information, but here's some. In the year 597, Gregory the Great sent Austin, or as he is sometimes called, Augustine, to Britain to convert the Saxons. Austin was to offer them the most liberal terms and allow them to retain all of their former practices if they would submit to that Catholic baptism. Augustine, disgusting. He was not to destroy the heathen temples, only to remove the images of their gods, to wash the walls with holy water, to erect altars and deposit relics in them, and so convert them into kind of Christian-style churches, the Catholic way. Gregory directed him further to accommodate the services of the Christian worship as much as possible to those of the heathen, that the people might not be startled at the change. So this is how Catholicism did it. This is kind of a gradual, and they probably didn't change that much after that. So they're very pagan, very similar and comfortable for the pagans. Austin met with success. The king and great numbers of the people were converted to his views. So this is how Catholicism got in England. They came in so fast that he is said to have baptized 10,000 by immersion in one day in the River Swale. After success with the Saxons, Austin turned his attention to the British Christians to bring them, if possible, in subjection to the Pope. These are the Baptists. The native Christians did not acknowledge the supremacy of Rome. They did not practice infant baptism. These and other questions greatly perplexed Austin. So let's finish off here with this statement he says here. All right. A code letter L, as in loser, or lucky. L. Austin was instructed by Gregory to say the following. You act in many particulars contrary to our custom. This is what he's supposed to say to the Baptists. Or rather, the custom of the universal church. And yet, if you will comply with me in these 3 points, what? To keep Easter at, so look at that, brother, there it is. To keep Easter at the due time, to administer baptism, by which we are born to God, or born again to God, by which we are again born to God, according to the custom of the Roman Apostolic Church, and jointly with us preach the Word of God to the English nation. Well, we can do that. We will readily tolerate the other things you do, though contrary to our custom. So the 2 big ones there I would have a problem with is observe Easter. Many Christians today, though, have no problem observing Easter, huh? And will accept their baptism. They answered that they would do none of these things, nor receive him as their archbishop. Yeah. Austin was true to his threat, and he did bring war and wretchedness upon the Baptists of England. Roger de Windover says that all of this came to pass in every respect as he had foretold, through the working of God's vengeance. That's what was supposed to have happened here, God's vengeance. True to the principles of Roman Catholics and Pedo-baptism, an army was sent with orders that the Britons should be slain. These are the Baptist Christians there. Should be slain even though they bore no arms. About 1,200 of them who came to pray are said to have been killed, and only about 50 escaped by flight. The papists bragged that he was the apostle to the English. Who? Austin. Let's stop there.